people, and welcome to another Mega Man list. And you know what, I'm sick of these best Mega Man games lists I find online. It's always someone who calls themselves a journalist, plays the games maybe once if that, and then writes some chunk about the games in 15 minutes. Or even worse, they make a video about it. I've seen too many lists where people say they force themselves to play this Mega Man game to write this review. If that's your mindset, the review is gonna be skewed as hell. Well, I just realized I never did a best Mega Man games list, even though I evaluated all of the games on this channel. So if you never really watched those videos or haven't checked my site, here is my opinion on the matter. I'm using my 27 years of experience on Mega Man games to make these lists. If your list is different, and it probably is, leave it as a comment below. I'd like to argue about Mega Man 8. So again, keep in mind, this list is based on the rankings that are up on my website at nicoevaluates.com, which again is based on my Nico Evaluates series. You'll find the full episodes of these games in my channel. If you haven't seen the best stages, best weapons and best Robot Masters lists, go check them out. They seem to be well regarded. So here's a critic's opinion on the best Mega Man games. The Handheld list as well as the X lists are coming later, so we'll be excluding those. This time it's 1 through 11 and Rockman Forte. For the full in-depth analysis on each game, click the card on the upper right as they pop up. Let's go. Rockman Forte, 2.1 stars. One of the games will be last when there's competition, and this time it's Rockman Forte. The game recycles a lot of its content from Mega Man 8 for the audience that couldn't get that game at the time. Rockman Forte looks cheap compared to its brother. The only major difference between the games is that Rockman Forte is brutal. The overall design of the game is more about killing or damaging the player for fun, rather than having fair challenge. When you look up artificial difficulty in the dictionary, you can see a picture of Rockman Forte. In this game, you get to choose between Mega Man and Bass. The title was basically meant to be played as Bass, since Mega Man doesn't have the maneuverability to tackle the stages cleanly. I'm not saying the game is good if you pick Bass, but it's at least a bit better, even though it has its own host of issues. I have an endless list of crap that's wrong with this game, so instead of me talking about it for hours, just watch my Nico Evaluates Mega Man and Bass series. I could still tell you the few of the worst experiences I had. I collected a bunch of bolts from the stages, only to be fondled by these midgets a few times and all my bolts were gone. An hour worth of collecting bolts now means nothing. How about a Robot Master who can endlessly refill its health? Or a big telly that kills you instantly and then shows you where you need to be to avoid the fire, only to come back in your way when you do exactly as asked. How about a mini-boss with 96 HP? I'll be battling this poppycock for hours. Rockman Forte is full of this crap, and all of it is needless. The weapons are fine, if not even good, I do admit. But what good does that do if the game itself is poor? Enemies drop on you, teaching elements are nowhere to be found, and most of the encounters you'll have are hair-tearingly awful. Oh, and just like Mega Man 8, this game has a real problem with the lack of enemy variety. You'll be shooting the same enemies over and over with little to no exciting gameplay, and when it seems like there are new enemies about, they are just sprite swaps. There are a handful of people who like to defend this game, but critically, there is no way. This game is meant for people who have a personal attachment to it, either through nostalgia or otherwise. I just don't get it. Mega Man 8, 2.5 stars.
Mega Man 8!
There are two kinds of people. Those who think Mega Man 8 sucks, and those who are wrong. Someone asked me to never say that again, or they'll unsubscribe. With its abysmal sound effects and voices, subpar level and enemy design, and childlike demeanor, it's no wonder this game didn't satisfy anyone. Granted, there will always be someone who likes any given game, be it a sick pleasure or nostalgia, who am I to judge? Mega Man 8 has decent mechanics under its gameplay, but the main issue is the repetitious nature of the game. While there are a handful of enemies, they more often than not resort using the same 5 enemies over and over again. This kills any creativity what comes to the different Robot Masters and their levels. What could be unique and clever ends up being the same garbage that just repeats and it gets boring pretty quickly. Never does it feel like you're actually progressing in the game when all you do is kill the same enemies over and over again. When the game does try to be more interesting, it royally messes everything up. Empty maze to get lost in, another empty maze to get lost in, a weapon trial that's nowhere near polished enough, boxes that hate you, horribly executed sled sections, level design by a 5-year-old, and the list goes on. It's just not good enough for a Mega Man game. Or at least we have cutscenes this time around, showing what the PlayStation can really do.
What do you think of these?
Boop. This is beautiful. But I've never seen this time around. I don't know where this energy came from, but we cannot let it fall into Dr. Wonder's head. You must recover all the energy immediately.
Okay, maybe throw those in the trash. And the weapons, they all do the same amount of damage, or close enough. Usually the weapons in Mega Man games all have their own purpose and situation where they would be useful, but it makes little to no sense choosing a melee weapon in Mega Man 8 instead of a ranged one when the damage is the same, or even worse. The only good thing about this game might be the Robot Master fights. They are indeed decent.
Let's make this a fair fight.
Oh. Innovation was certainly one of the key elements when developing Mega Man 8, but it ended up being its downfall. When the game isn't boring, it's overly gimmicky and it introduces a ridiculous stage design that just doesn't fit the image of a Mega Man game. Take out the name Mega Man and replace it with Teddy the Kid in Miracle World and you'd probably have a hidden gem in your hands. Or not. Mega Man 5, 3 stars. If this wasn't about Mega Man, the 5th installment would actually be one of the better titles in the vast library of the NES. When you make a game about Mega Man, however, everyone has a set of expectations. Mega Man 5 doesn't hit any of those. Enemies either run away from you, scroll off the screen, or die instantly to the overpowered Mega Buster. The Charged Buster is so powerful that it goes through everything in the game. Every single thing the game puts before you just dies. And that in return makes all of the game's weapons useless. It's not an entirely bad set of weapons, but having the charge so powerful leaves no space for them. It's simply much easier to keep charging than swapping weapons. There are not many enemies that don't just immediately eat shit when shot with a charge. The gyro attack is the most interesting one, but even then it's very limited. If you really wanted to enjoy Mega Man 5, I'd urge you to try a no buster run of the game. The design of the game otherwise is not bad, the stages are colorful and interesting to look at, physics, mechanics, teaching elements, it's all quite average. Acceptable. Just looking at Mega Man 5 gives the impression that it might be a fun experience, but once you actually play it, it's clear that care.exe has stopped working. The Robot Masters aren't great either, they are very simple and, for the lack of a better word, brain dead. Certainly nothing interesting to see here apart from Charge Man. Wish he was in a better game. Castle stages also need a mention. They're like your generic Mega Maker garbage, nothing fits a certain theme, and enemies are just littered about. Despite playing Mega Man 5 countless times, I still can't tell the castle stages apart from each other. The game does attempt to do something new with its letter collecting gimmick, gifting you Beat Call if you do collect them all. Even Beat with its homing attacks isn't powerful enough to compete with the Charged Buster. But hey, it easily kills Wily, so naturally it's better. /sarcasm. It always rubs me the wrong way when people say the one thing that the one weapon is good at, and then automatically that is supposed to make it good. It's like saying the bubble lead is good because it can find hidden holes. Yeah, nice, that's like one use case for the entire game. Well, anyway, if you're new to Mega Man, this title is a good, easy start. Otherwise, I'd leave it on the shelf. Mega Man 5 is just like any other Capcom game on the NES, just dropping the name Mega Man off it makes it a little bit better. It even shares the game engine with Darkwing Duck. Makes you wonder which game was more important to Capcom at the time. Who wouldn't play Darkwing Duck instead? Mega Man 2, 4.2 stars. I remember joining YouTube back in 2006 and discussing Mega Man games in small circles back then. I always got a lot of shit for saying I didn't like Mega Man 2 and that it was overrated in my opinion. When I finally made the Mega Man 2 vs Mega Man 4 comparison video, a lot of people I felt like saw where I was coming from. Critically, Mega Man 2 is pretty poor. If you have nostalgia for it, however, you'll find it excellent despite its flaws. Stage design is boring, boss fights are mediocre, and overall the game is quite bland. Long stretches of nothing, weapons that are god awful apart from the metal blades and quick boomerang, and do we even need to discuss the metal blades? They break the whole game. The usual structure of a Mega Man game allows you to use the different weapons in different scenarios, and they all should have their use. Here, you use the other weapons maybe 1 or 2 times in the entire game, and for the rest, you equip the metal blades. Talk about horrible balance. The very idea that makes a Mega Man game is broken. Wily stages are laughable after Wily 1, providing little to nothing in terms of gameplay. 1 or 2 enemy types a stage, bland colors, awful designs, and just short levels. This is ridiculous. Mega Man 2 is one of the worst official Mega Man games to date that is only kept alive through nostalgia. People often come up with excuses trying to defend Mega Man 2, saying that they were new at this kind of thing and the final levels are bad because they didn't know their shit yet. But look at Mega Man 1. They definitely knew their shit, as the endgame levels of 1 are far more interesting and just critically better. Weapons that don't work, empty sections, horrible level design, questionable bosses, the list is endless. Like I said in my intro, watch the full evaluation to learn more. Mega Man 2 is one of those that I really can't sum up well enough in a list like this. You need to watch the whole series. I could make an individual video on every subject of this review, and it still wouldn't be enough. Let's end on a positive note though. Music is bearable here and there, Woodman stage is actually alright, so is Wily 1. Enemy placements are okay for the most part. Damn. Mega Man 2 is at least responsible for the majority of people even knowing about Mega Man in the first place, but it didn't age well. Because of Mega Man 2's success, the series kept going, and without it, we probably wouldn't have a massive library of Mega Man games today. Bad or not, that's a fact. Then again, it could have just been a good game to begin with. Mega Man, 5.1 stars. The beginning of the journey. The original Mega Man is like putting a paper bag over your head, running against a wall, getting a concussion, but realizing how much fun you had. Sure, the mechanics are a bit off, the weapons are quite strange at times and the Robot Masters require a physics degree to understand, but the game's heart is in the right place. Where Mega Man 2 dropped the ball, namely the Wily stages, Mega Man 1 kept them interesting. Can't argue with that. Capcom had to know how to make interesting endgame levels, and the first game is a great example of their enthusiasm, something that the second title was lacking at the end of the game. The biggest difference between Mega Man 1 and the rest, I always thought, was the weird feeling I always got when playing this game. It's somehow a lot more dark than its siblings. It truly feels like you're alone against the world. The dark atmosphere, the treacherous hazards and the quirky surprise elements truly make this a fantastic game. While I do agree that Mega Man 2's levels are a bit more detailed, overall the first game nails the whole package a lot better. Weapons are more balanced, even if not perfect, and the endgame is actually interesting and keeps you hooked. Even with its bare designs, the simplicity of it all is beautiful. Everything is carefully placed where they need to be, and even when they're not, it's almost impossible to hate this game. Except Eggman stage, what a bunch of garbage. Did I mention my best stages list yet? Well, you should go watch it. While I do recognize that the first game is nowhere near perfect, it's still a lot better than the second one, at least critically looking. Shame there are only 6 stages, with some of them being too short and some of them being too long. The enemy variety as well is also lacking, but at least the placements are thought out decently enough. The game does have its issues, but for the first try, they did damn well. Whether it's dodging the bladers, positioning yourself to avoid gunfire, learning enemy patterns or dueling a Cho, it all makes you want to learn it that much more. Sure, the Robot Masters and their patterns don't make much sense to a newcomer, but luckily they can also be dissected. Critically, a horrible job really, but it more than makes up for it with its charming gameplay. Mega Man 1 was always hard to rate, and it still is. Considering the high standards of Mega Man, it's pretty low on the list, but I'd still knock it over Mega Man 2 simply because I can feel the enthusiasm the developers had when creating this. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and desert you. Mega Man 11, 6.3 stars. Mega Man 11 is whatever you make of it. More often than not, the stages are designed in a way where a simple use of rush will deny most of the challenge, so the more you scum the game, the worse it gets. Balls are handed out for free all the time, which makes the remaining challenge null and void. Mega Man 11 is a traditional take on the franchise and doesn't even let the veterans down, except for being way too short of an experience. There really isn't enough levels after the Robot Masters. 2.5D works surprisingly well, with only minor problems. Physics and mechanics are well honed, and the level design is top notch. Interestingly enough, the Robot Master lineup is possibly the best out of all the games. They're all good in their own rights and designed extremely well. Having the gear system, whether you use it or not, is a nice change of pace and breathes fresh air into the franchise. Nowhere is it required, it's purely there to aid you if you so desire. And plus, it can provide a cool effect here and there, if nothing else. Even though this is a game made for modern era, they never forgot what made side-scrolling Mega Man games good. Teaching the player and then testing them to see what they learned, the same mentality is still present here. Mega Man 11 is simply put, too short. The moment you start to enjoy it, it's over. The end game really doesn't have any kind of theme, and again the enemies are just littered around the stages with no real passion. It feels like Mega Man 2 again, in that sense. No real updates or DLC was ever released, and the content is lacking from the get-go. Most levels are phenomenal and nicely crafted, but we do have a few stinkers. One other major complaint I have is that most of the enemies are just borrowed from other games, mainly Mega Man 5. This results in Mega Man 11 aging a lot faster than the other games. After defeating the game, there is little to no reason to play it again, unless you like the mini-challenges. That's a shame, because it's not a bad game. Mega Man 11 is kind of a missed opportunity. It didn't let us down, but we don't hold it up on a pedestal either. At least the soundtrack is something I still listen to. Some might consider Mega Man 11 one of the best, but it hardly brings anything new to the table, and what it does it in a very average way. It had all the potential, but I feel like the developers stopped giving a shit at some point and just released it. I went from, hey, this is pretty good, to, it's alright, to, maybe I'll never play this again. But maybe I will. Today is not today though. I still like the game for what it is, but it wasn't the proper reboot to the series I would have hoped. Mega Man 6, 6.4 stars. It's beautiful, it's fresh, it's a ton of fun. Except you can't jump from a slide. Alright, that's just ruined the whole game. Mega Man 6 was a result of Nintendo pushing Capcom to release the game because at the time, Mega Man was so popular they wanted to cash in with it one more time during the NES's deathbed. The introduced adapters are a fun change of pace, but they are overused during the endgame stages. All you'll be doing is putting on one of the adapters, clearing an obstacle, equipping something else, walking a few steps, equipping the adapter back, then the buster, then another adapter, buster. The flow is disrupted, and this issue makes the adapters more of a chore than something exciting. The adapters themselves are alright, but the end result just feels like work. The soundtrack is awesome and the game does bring back that authentic Mega Man feel, but these issues can't be overlooked. We have a decent lineup of Robot Masters, above average levels, and overall, it's almost there. Shame that bad controls and lazy adaptations to the adapters ruin the rest of the game. Oh, and beat is pretty useless as well. You can't really think about using the weapons that much, since after a few steps you're pretty much forced right back into the adapters to fly over something or break a block or something like that. I'd have as much fun as you could in the Robot Master levels, since those don't really force the adapters on you. Once you cross that bridge though, it's going to get quite tedious. Mega Man 6 isn't bad, but sometimes over-engineering the game can become a curse. The Robot Masters being based off of countries was a nice idea and gave the community something to tinker with. The levels match pretty nicely to their respective Robot Masters, and I can't say I hated any of the levels that much, even though the quality does vary. The controls just prevent me from really enjoying the game, which is a shame since it's really a decent one. What this game needs is a ROM hack with the slide jump mechanic fixed, as well as making the adapters flow better for the end game. I always wanted to put Mega Man 6 right beside Mega Man 4, but I could never do it. It's a game that does a lot of things right, but it's just too cumbersome. It's like a gymnast doing a perfect combo but then landing on their head, cracking their skull open. Every time I see the cartridge of Mega Man 6, I can't help but think, I wish I could enjoy you. Mega Man 3, 7.7 stars. Mega Man 3 does many things right. Colorful stages, mostly well-designed challenges, semi-fun weapons. Not you. But then, it makes you repeat 4 of the Robot Master stages again, with slight modifications, and bosses that come back from Mega Man 2. These are horribly designed, and this was probably the biggest issue I had in this game. While the idea sounds nice on paper, its execution is just dreadful. On top of the mediocre endgame, Mega Man 3 suffers from enormous lag and controller inputs that get eaten with regularity. Quite often the game just skips inputs entirely, like shots. There are also a handful of smaller problems, like horrible boss AI, some of the weapons being putrid, but all in all, it's well above average. Don't get me wrong, Mega Man 3 is still a respectable piece of Mega Man history. The newly added slide plays well into the design of the levels, and the enemies all feel at home in their own stages. Mega Man 3 was made Nintendo hard on purpose, but what the developers forgot was what made Mega Man great in the first place. Learning AI patterns and becoming better as you play. There is no such thing with these dark robots. I think critically Mega Man 3 doesn't have any actual problems, but rather a lot of small issues that pile up and eat away from the whole experience. When you play Mega Man 3, you need to be able to set those issues aside to fully enjoy it. One moment you're having fun, the other your shots don't come out, you're doing some sick moves, only to be encountering Doc Wood, seeing the amazing Wily Machine, only to be block spammed to death. It's just a never-ending line of good and bad, but in the end, the good beats the bad if you're in the right mindset. Casually, this game is awesome, and you won't probably even think about these problems, but as soon as you try and challenge yourself or go a bit faster, you'll end up lifting your fingernails off your fingers in frustration. Mega Man 3, however, nails the flow so well that the negative aspects of the game can be thrown aside. Much like Mega Man 9, this game was designed with certain goals in mind from the get-go. You can see what the developers wanted and how it all should play out, and guiding the player is done so well that it's almost like reading the minds of the people who worked on the game. There is this connection between you and the developers that can't easily be explained, and that is what makes Mega Man 3 great. But is there a reason Rush is so broken? This thing can literally hover in the air. Certainly too powerful, which they later then fixed. But hey, the bosses are interesting, weapons do come to your aid quite well, Robot Masters are memorable, and graphics have been certainly improved. There is much more to approve than disapprove here. Mega Man 10, 8.8 stars. There is nothing really wrong about Mega Man 10, I just personally never really liked it. It felt cumbersome, and after the greatness that was Mega Man 9, a lot of its ideas are just perplexing, far-fetched, or plain out horribly executed. Robot Masters are fine and the weapons are a nice change of pace, but I feel like the rhythm of a Mega Man game is the biggest thing that is missing. You can never really grab the game by its balls and tug, there seems to be a lot of small annoyances littered all over. Level design is on the higher notes, and despite the lack of rhythm and flow, the game still manages to surprise the player and keep them hooked. Mega Man 10 didn't really do anything wrong per se, but I don't feel like it's quite there either. The essence of a true Mega Man game seems to be just out of grasp. Surprisingly, the endgame of Mega Man 10 is phenomenal, and the development was truly carried till the end, and it shows. Except for that fucking Block Devil. This has got to be the worst boss ever on a Mega Man game. You got 2 tiles to stand on during the entire fight, all while trying to lay in some desperate shots or learning geometry on the go. But enough of that, the endgame boss list is due anyway. Listen, Mega Man 10 is beautiful, it's interesting, and the foes and stages are good. You grow into liking the music eventually. Robot Masters are mostly fun, I mean, there's not much to let you down honestly. But there's just something I don't like about it, but I can't really tell you what it is. Maybe it's me, not the game. Not a big fan of the bolt system, but more about my opinion on that during Mega Man 9. Oh sweet, quick switch for the weapons. Now we are talking. Mega Man 10 truly pulls off all the familiar things that the games are known for. It just has its own distinct style. It almost feels like a community-made game in a certain way. A little weird here and there, some questionable design choices, but in the end, it still holds itself up proudly. A critic needs to be able to look past their own nose. Just because I don't personally like it, doesn't mean it's a bad game. It's a pretty fantastic game, I just have to acknowledge that. The majority of people adore Mega Man 10, and I have to agree. The minor mistakes that are there are so meaningless that they don't really cause any ill effects to the gaming experience. Mega Man 10 is a respectable piece of work that doesn't let a Mega Man fan down. Except for the fucking Block Devil. Suck my dick. Mega Man 4, 9.2 stars. Mega Man 4 was as perfect as the NES games could get. Well, almost. Mega Man 4 is just beautiful. Every enemy feels like it's placed just where it needs to be. The charged buster isn't overpowered like it was in Mega Man 5, and thus the weapons get to shine. This is certainly the best weapon lineup in the entire NES hexalogy. Dust Crusher is probably the worst one, but even then it still has its uses. The game was designed from the start till the end with quality in mind. Stage layouts are fantastic, enemies are intriguing, and it's just a joy to look at. The Robot Masters are probably the worst part about the game, they're really mediocre. Controls are perfect, apart from the fact that sometimes turning is a bit awkward while charging, resulting in firing the charge shot the wrong way. These are the two major hiccups in an otherwise fantastic experience. You'd think that with so many levels they'd eventually run out of memory or care, but no. The Cossack and Wily stages are very well executed and it just makes you want more. This time the end bosses are really interesting as well, making you ponder a great while what weapons to use on them. Small mistakes here and there aren't enough to sour the deal though. Mega Man 4 is one of the best Mega Man games, if not even one of the best NES games out there. And the soundtrack? Not appreciated enough. After you've played this game, you can't honestly even argue about Mega Man 2 being critically better, there's just no competition. Even in the small details like the items, they have been vastly improved. It's just overall a better version of Mega Man. Every screen is like art. Just by looking at the game your mind starts to wander. You compare your weapons to the enemies on screen, you try them out and get surprised how well they work every single time. What I also love about the game is that there are multiple ways to tackle any given situation. Depending on your arsenal and skills, there is always a better way, you just have to find it. Enemies feel like they are really after Mega Man, not just aimlessly moving around. Mega Man 4 never stops being interesting. Even with the mediocre levels like Ringman's, there is never a dull moment. Mega Man 4 often gets criticized about the charge shot being too powerful, but I believe you're full of shit. People who say that, say so because they played the game once, just to write a review. Play Mega Man 5 and come back to me. Actually, Mega Man 4 can be beaten in a fun manner without ever using the buster. If you asked me to mention a game that taught the player all the lessons they needed, in a fun and exciting way, while simultaneously rewarding them for doing well, I would always point them to this game. Are video games art? I don't know, but Mega Man 4 certainly is. Mega Man 7, 9.5 stars. Mega Man 7 stands for everything that Mega Man was supposed to be from the beginning. Transferring the franchise over to the next generation console, however, meant that some things were a bit difficult to implement. The game supposedly was made in about 3 months, which is the real surprise element here. Apart from the wonky ladders and the edges of platforms being questionable, this is the perfect Mega Man game. Alright, so maybe you'll never find all of the secrets without some guidance. Cloudman stage is pretty bad, but hey, that's pretty much all of the crap out of the way. Mega Man 7 is a colorful, lively experience. The enemies aren't just pacing back and forth, it definitely feels like they are aware of Mega Man's presence, just like in Mega Man 4. Shame about the ladders and platforms though, those were always so polished prior, but hey, it's an excellent game if you can look past these minor flaws. The Robot Master fights are one of the more interesting ones, the weapons are exceptionally fun to use, and again, just like with Mega Man 4, the stages are built for everything in mind. One thing I never liked, however, was that the game starts you with 4 Robot Masters instead of 8, and I see no reason for this. Of course, you can use a password to unlock them all from the start, but you shouldn't have to do that. Jumping some gaps can be difficult, and you never really get the same accuracy on your movements as you did on the NES counterparts. Trying to find these secrets can be fun, but like I said, most of the time it's just a burden that's weighing down on your shoulders. Nintendo power was certainly needed. Mega Man 7 tries to innovate a bit with its new ideas and fresh level design, and I'd say it pulls it off, if not perfectly, then close enough. I had the most fun in the game while, well, doing everything basically. I never felt bored, and some of the Robot Master fights are so good I nearly cream myself every time. I also like how the game acknowledges the past designs of the old games and brings them back in an interesting and fun manner while still keeping it fresh and new. There's honestly little to nothing else to criticize the game about. The weapon menu does suck. And my god does it suck. You probably expected me to say something about the final Wily. I love it. It's a perfect end boss that requires that you master it. It's very doable, and once you pull it off, you'll be forever grateful you went through it. It's an experience you won't forget. Mega Man 11 would have probably done a lot better if it had been done in this style. Mega Man 9, 9.6 stars. Welcome back. That's what Mega Man 9 would say if it could talk. Mega Man 9 is what Mega Man 2 should have been. It even shares some of the weapon ideas, but makes them actually useful. This game does have the tendency to kill you for fun at times, but that's the only actual flaw in the game. And if you're really nitpicky, you could say that the Wily stages aren't really well structured. They really feel like they're just random in their atmosphere. What Mega Man 9 does well, it's everything else. The flow is immaculate. Out of all the games, I feel like I enjoyed this the most because of it. There is this constant feel of being in control and having the game's throat in your grip as you plow through the levels after learning how it all works. The gameplay is extremely satisfying. Great teams throughout, Robot Masters couldn't have been better. Well, sort of. The music begs to be hummed out loud, enemy placements are grand, the list is endless. Mega Man 9 is as perfect as a Mega Man game can get. The stages weren't done like this in an accident. You can tell that the developers had years of experience when they put this game together. When the developers enjoy their work, you can live their enjoyment through the game, and that's exactly what Mega Man 9 does. Makes you feel like you and your actions matter. While it's true that the game can be cruel at times, it never really makes you mad. It just makes you grip the controller harder and trying again. The sharp and the bolt system, I was never really a fan for any Mega Man game. All it does is it allows you to scum the game if you don't want to learn it. Besides, why the hell is Eddie 50 bolts? Are you mad? I don't get out of bed for Eddie. But what I do get out of bed for is Mega Man 9. That is my list. Hope you enjoyed the summary. And don't forget to go and watch my multiple episode series on all of these games, and you'll get the in-depth analysis that way. It's impossible to cover everything in a video like this. But I got the main points out, that's the most important thing. Till next time then, take care. Thanks for watching another Nico Evaluates. Join us in Discord to talk about Mega Man, White Bread, and the neighbor's dog. Impact the show in my Patreon, or just throw a few bucks if you wanna buy me coffee. Check our merch at teespring.com/store/Snupster and get my quotes on your shirt. If you want to see weekly Mega Man races, go ahead and subscribe to Snupster. Catch you on the next one.